Welcome to Self Wellness.
What's up, everybody? Another fantastic day with Maha with Mike, another great episode where we dive into the health and wellness of this country, the future of humanity. And today I've got a banger for you guys because it's double Doctor Day. We're going to be bringing in Dr. Bartlett and also bringing in Dr. Clacker to talk about what we can do to make the human body even better with natural, fantastic minerals and supplements that are existing here in Mother Nature. But first, we're going to dive into President Trump and his health. But before we do that, I'm going to bring up a clip before we bring in Dr. Bartlett of the previous president that we had. And you guys be the judge of which president you would rather have at the helm. Drake, roll the footage.
What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
Mr. President, thank you. At the end.
It reminds me of that clip, Drake. You remember that clip from it wasn't Happy Gilmore. It was the one where he went back to school. Remember in the auditorium where he goes, none of what you said made any sense. And I think everybody in this room now hearing that is dumber. That was a great clip. Let's bring in Dr. Bartlett and get his opinion on what we just watched.
Yikes, Mike. Wow. Leader of the free world, representing all Americans. Oh, my goodness. We were in a very dangerous position for the last 4 years. And now we have actually a competent, medically, legally, mentally competent adult that's our president again. And so we're in a whole different situation. We're already better off on day one.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I know that you're on call right now, so if you disappear out of the room, you are the emergency room doc right now. So if they do call you in, and we 100% appreciate you for coming and kind of talk about this topic. And again, for anybody who didn't watch you the first time you've been on my show, can you give us just a quick background, your medical background, and kind of how you stepped up during COVID, and you kind of fought the medical tyranny, and you had found a solution that has now been recognized all over the world for not only COVID, but long haul COVID symptoms. Is that correct?
So I've been a doctor in Texas for 34 years. Governor Rick Perry asked me to be on the Texas Health Disparities Task Force for 2 years. That was a 2-year appointment. And after the end of 2 years, he said, would you stay one more year? And that happened year after year for a total of 7 years. After the 7 years, I was surprised to receive the Meritorious Service Award from Texas Health and Human Services for what we accomplished in trying to increase and actually increasing access to quality health care for every Texan, whether it's rural, urban, inner city, all ethnicities, all cultures. And so we had great success. During COVID, at the beginning of COVID, all doctors were told basically to stand down, that there's nothing you can do. The American people were told, hide in place, shelter in place, and don't go to the hospital if you're sick. Remember that? And that didn't settle well with me as an ER doctor. And so I was used to problem solving. And when I went to the emergency room in March of 2020, I was told there's nothing you can do, like all Americans were. And that's when a strategy came to me that I presented of using an inhaled steroid, budesonide, that's been out for over 30 years, used on 2-pound premature babies without batting an eye. It's that safe. That's as delicate a human as they make. And it's $3 a treatment, so Big Pharma wasn't going to make a dime off of it. And it worked. A year later, Oxford University, the oldest university in the English-speaking world, validated what I did with the STOIC trial, and they concluded, and they still say on Oxford University's website, that 90% of COVID patients would not have come close to a hospital if they were treated early with just that one product, budesonide, twice a day. And can you imagine 1.2 million Americans died after they got COVID from secondary bacterial pneumonia and other treatment tragedies, a failed treatment strategy by the federal government? What if 900,000 of those Americans would not have come close to a hospital? Does that mean 900,000 Americans would not have died? I think so, based on the Oxford information called the STOIC trial, the principal trial. But we've also been in the middle of the measles outbreak, which is in my neighborhood in West Texas. Those are friends and neighbors of mine. And so we have been able to squash that outbreak. If you'll compare this worldwide outbreak of measles this year to what's happening in Europe, for instance, they got 127,000 measles cases at the same time that we have less than 600. I think RFK is doing a great job. Make America Healthy Again. We shine what we're doing under RFK here in this current Make America Healthy Again movement. And we're already having huge effects. So I've been the medical expert for CBS affiliate in West Texas for 23 years, medical expert on multiple radio stations. And so I'm very busy. Right now, I'm the ER doctor on duty. And at the moment, I have no patients, so I'm in the call room doing this show. So if I get called away, it's because I'm really an ER doctor really working. I'm not just one that plays one on TV.
I was just gonna say, guys, he's not filming for an episode of Scrubs. This is the real deal. And correct me if I'm wrong, but like budesonide has been around for a very, very long time. Not only is it proven safe and effective, but this is something that has been used for COPD and asthma. I was reading before I hopped on the show with you that ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. There are so many things that have proven that what this medication, and again, you said around $3 a treatment, so many people have alleviated their allergies, and that this thing is incredible at stopping inflammation, which we knew that's what COVID was. We knew that COVID was an irritant to the lungs. And, I said from the very beginning, I think that there's going to be doctors out there that are going to come out and they are going to find things that were way, way, way less expensive than putting people on a ventilator. And, I think that as soon as you start tying, what Big Pharma allowed to have happen, I can't tell you how many people that I know in my circle that have said that they wish that they never would have went with the hospital protocol that was given. And after researching and finding about your work, like you said, possibly millions of lives would have been saved if we would have tried this little $3-4 treatment. And I also saw in your protocol using aspirin. That's correct, right?
Yes,
you would combine the aspirin with.
That's right, Mike. The strategy, my protocol was very simple. COVID was an inflammatory bioweapon made in a lab. Viruses come from nature. Bioweapons come from labs. And now you have the CDC, you have the CIA, the FBI, the Congressional Subcommittee on COVID that studied it for 2 years, the Department of Energy Intelligence Branch, that's code for spies, all saying that COVID came from a lab. Viruses come from nature, bioweapons come from labs. This was a deadly disease that came from a lab that caused inflammation and clotting and triggered such severe inflammation that many times people would go into a cytokine storm. That led eventually to most people dying from secondary bacterial pneumonia. But the thing that came out of COVID was we had a winning strategy. Dr. Ben Carson, a brilliant brain surgeon that everybody's familiar with, said on live TV that that the FDA had to suppress budesonide because there's an FDA rule that you cannot give emergency use authorization for real-time human experimentation with a experimental shot that's been very famous, or with any of the other experimental treatments at the time, like remdesivir in the hospital, if you already have an effective, safe treatment. And so he literally said they had to suppress budesonide. So budesonide, $3 a treatment, readily available at every pharmacy on every corner in the United States. Years later now, what I presented and published first was validated in Oxford University and is now added to the beginning of the treatment strategy in Australia in their 840-page federal document on how to treat COVID. It's also in India. India may be the most populous country in the world now that China had to they decreased their population census during COVID. China, for the first time in 50 years, decreased their total population. So India might be the most populous country. They have at their national strategy to treat COVID what I presented, budesonide, at the beginning of COVID. So this is something that's effective, it's safe enough for premature babies in the NICU for 30 years, and it's inexpensive, readily available, and absolutely did save millions of lives worldwide, but it could have saved 900,000 more lives if it wouldn't have been heavily censored and suppressed. And when you think about Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook being confessing to Congress in front of the whole world that he colluded to censor and suppress life-saving information about COVID, including this strategy, when you consider that when I did the interview in July of 2020 on Debbie Georgiato's America Can We Talk on YouTube, and we had 5.5 million views in 10 days, and YouTube pulled it and still has it pulled from their website because it didn't meet their community standards, is what they said. Everything in that was truth after truth that was life-saving information that's now been recognized by congressmen and senators, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services himself is well aware of this. And yet YouTube is going to tell people what they can't know. This is the opposite of the MAHA movement. MAHA is all about transparency, informed consent, giving the people all the information so they can weigh the risk and the benefits of all treatment options so that parents can decide what's best for their children, not the school system doing it. During COVID, we had constitutional rights suspended, patient rights suspended, parental rights suspended. And I'll give you an example. You were not allowed to decide what treatment strategy you wanted during COVID. They only offered one. Eventually, the treatment that was offered outpatient was brought to you by Pfizer, and initially $1,500 for the treatment. And, let's talk about Pfizer for just a second. Mike, guess which organization has the record for the largest criminal fine in the history of the United States for health care crimes? Is it the
I'm going to guess it's
Mexican?
Pfizer.
All right, you're good.
I'm going to guess it's Pfizer. Followed by probably followed by Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and then maybe like the Mexican cartel with fentanyl. Or maybe I would say like the Bill Gates or Bill Clinton Foundation, because I'm pretty sure that they were the ones that were funneling in those drugs from all the things that I've read online.
Yes. So that's very telling that the mainstream news is brought to you by Pfizer. And then you look at the propaganda and the spin that they put on everything, the attempts to character assassinate people who are standing up for the American people, who at their own peril right now, like RFK Jr., are wanting transparency, wanting safe food, safe water. How dare he want safe food and safe water? Well, he's paying a price for it. They're attacking him, but he's up for the job. And so RFK is all about transparency. Parental rights were suspended. from coast to coast, kids would be hauled into the nurse's station, pinned down, and they'd be shot with an experimental product without the parents' permission and consent, with the COVID shot. And then the parents would find out about it, sue the school system, sue the county hospital and the county health departments, and this lawsuit would be thrown out of court because it had no standing in the United States. It's basically your children, the school system's choice, your children, the government's choice. That is not the America that we live in. That is medical tyranny. That is against our constitutional rights, our parental rights, our patient rights. It is un-American. It's not acceptable. And so there's been an appeal to that movement, but we're not done yet. Excuse me for that. And so
you don't have to apologize. So, this ties me, Dr. Bartlett, this ties me into the next thing. When you start talking about the level of corruption, and it reminds me, when you were talking about, if there's a proven safe, effective, drug or anything that's out there, it would override them being able to use an emergency use authorization and this experimental, gene therapy and everything that the COVID shot has been called, everything from a bioweapon to a death sentence. I remember I had friends that were registered nurses, and I had friends that were, went to church with me that were doctors, and they were referring to remdesivir as run, death is near. Like literally, they were like, once we give people this remdesivir, we knew that there was a good chance that this patient was going to not improve. But it was the protocol that they were following, which now you've got organizations out there like Protocol Kills. But I want to ask your opinion. If you haven't seen the clip, and I think this goes into the very fiber of who we are as Americans, right? Because it goes against everything that is hanging up in the Oval Office right above Trump's right shoulder where he's got the Constitution. And you've got people like Elon Musk, as hated as he is right now. One of the things that I think is the most scary that he said, other than when he was talking to Jordan Peterson and he said that they were looking to create a new God, I think what scared me even more than that is when he goes, the level of corruption that I have found with Doge and what they're doing, he said, if I fully expose the corruption, he said, they will kill me.
The president said that?
No. Elon Musk said that to Joe Rogan. He was on the Joe Rogan's show, and he had said, he goes, what we're finding out with Doge, he goes, we're only releasing, what we can. He says, I fear that if I fully expose how deep this corruption goes, they will kill me. And who's they?
I believe that. I believe it. And so we've seen, I've met with congressmen in the private club there in D.C. for congressmen, and they've told me across the breakfast table, Congressman so-and-so, his wife got the shot and she lost her vision. We've seen one congressman and senator after another personally suffer physical problems from these shots, and now we know. But he said many of us are scared to speak. We're talking about the top of our government is scared to speak right now about what they've seen. And what have we seen? Things are no longer able to be hidden. We know that there's a test that we do in the emergency room to see if someone's having a heart attack called troponin. Troponin is in healthy heart cells. It's not in the bloodstream. And so when someone's having heart cells die right then, we'll draw their blood and we'll see if there's an elevated troponin. If there's elevated troponin, it came from heart tissue that just died. And so in Switzerland, in the University of Basel in Switzerland, they looked at both Pfizer and Moderna mRNA shots, and they found that 2.8% of the people that got a shot had elevated troponin. Elevated troponin meaning they have heart tissue dying in real time. They may not feel chest pain. They may not know that the chest pain they're having is related to the shot because no one told them. But 2.8% have measurable, scientifically sound, without a shadow of a doubt, heart tissue dying as a result of the COVID shots. The public is not being told that. Many doctors are not aware of that because they're not educating themselves. They're not doing due diligence. They're just doing infomercials in their clinics for big pharma. But the facts are out that there are multiple ingredients that are in the COVID shots that are not for human or veterinary use, according to OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, supposed to protect Americans from dangerous chemicals. On each of these OSHA safety data sheets by the Cayman Chemical Company, it says not for human or veterinary use, for research use. These are in the COVID shots, SM-102 in every Moderna shot, ALC-0315 in every Pfizer shot, pseudouridine in every Pfizer shot, polyethylene glycol, which is antifreeze in your car, in every COVID shot. And then there's the COVID shots that were withdrawn from the market that never were FDA approved because there was evidence that they were dangerous and not effective. The Johnson & Johnson shot never was FDA approved. Many people got that thinking it would be one shot, one and done. But they didn't know that it wasn't FDA approved. It was just emergency use authorization, and they were the guinea pigs. And so we had so many people dying or being disabled from that shot that it got pulled from the market, never to be FDA approved. Mike, do you think that most people are being told that?
No, not at all. Not at all. Which is why so many people don't read the inserts, and they go through. I had shared something the other day, and it got. I don't know if it was censored or it just said it went up. It went against the community guidelines, and I don't know how it goes against community guidelines when there's no bad words. But it prompted me. It prompted me to share a following clip after that. But what I shared on social media, Doc, was basically it was the Blue Cross Blue Shield 2025 Quality Scoring Reimbursement Tables Performance Recognition Program. And what it was is it just highlighted the overall childhood immunization status, combo 10, the childhood immunization status flu, and the immunizations for adolescents, combo 2, and for the HPV vaccine. And it shows the fee schedule if a certain percentage of all of the pediatric clients receive those inoculations. And I'm like, if that's not a pay to play, then I don't know what is. So they're showing what they're receiving on the back end. But they said that this went against it. It went against their community guidelines, and I'm like, all I'm doing is just sharing what a doctor had sent to me. So then my next clip that I shared was it says if your doctor doesn't ask you what you eat, how often you exercise, how many hours you're sleeping, and then tends to write you a prescription, I said, you don't have a doctor, you have a drug dealer. Yeah,
and so my goodness, a lot to unpack in what you just said. But during COVID, you probably saw from the document that was on the internet that was sent to doctors from Blue Cross Anthem, and it said if you get 30% of your covered lives a shot in the arm with our particular insurance plan, you get $25 a head. But if you get 70% of those covered lives a shot in the arm, you'll get $125 a head. I saw that document. Many people saw that around the world because it was on the internet. That sounds like bribery to me. And to think that happened at the time that this was actually an experimental product. This is against the Nuremberg Code, basic international law that says that if you're going to do a human experiment, the person that's in the human experiment has the right to informed consent, knowing the risk and the benefit of treatment options. And there needs to be animal studies before there's human studies, before you do the biggest human experiment in the history of the world. We have, bottom line, a system that is broke. And RFK is not going to break it. You got the deep state, mainstream establishments in the healthcare system, federal healthcare system, and in the mainstream media that are benefiting from the current system that is broken. And they're trying to cause a tremendous amount of panic in the general public about RFK breaking the system. The system's broke. It's just benefiting these few people. And evidence that it's broke is I'm on the board of a nonprofit that sued the FDA for the Pfizer shot information. And the FDA told us, we don't want to, we're supposed to release this legally. We do have that in the computer, but we don't think this should be released to the American people for 55 years. And then later, 2 weeks later, they said, we changed our mind. We don't think this should be released for 75 years. And then we met them in federal court in Fort Worth. I was there with Aaron Siri, the attorney, and the federal judge, Mark Pittman, told the FDA, what is going on? Obviously, you need to release this information. It's critical for the doctors and the patients. And the FDA told the judge, pushed back on the judge through the Department of Justice lawyers and said, Judge, we don't have enough staff at the FDA to release this to the American people for 75 years. And without blinking or flinching, this Texas federal judge, Mark Pittman, told them, you're going to start releasing this information next month. And we got that information, and we saw why they were trying to hide the information. This is a broken system when the FDA is trying to hide information from relevant information that's critical during a worldwide pandemic from doctors and patients and citizens. And at the same time, you have the CDC director lying to the American people saying, if you get a particular product, a COVID shot, you will not get COVID. And then a second lie, if you get a COVID shot, you will not spread COVID. This was against the fear campaign that they were doing, saying, if you get the shot, you'll make sure you don't kill grandma. If you don't get the shot, you're public enemy number one. They used to say that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated until Cleveland Clinic showed that if you get 4 COVID shots, you're more likely to get COVID than if you got 3 COVID shots. If you got 3 COVID shots, you're more likely to get COVID than if you got 2 COVID shots. It's the opposite of effectiveness. They call it negative efficacy. And we just found out a week ago from Cleveland Clinic that the current flu shot has the same effect, negative efficacy. 28% increased chance of getting the flu if you get the current flu shot, according to the study that was published by Cleveland Clinic. And so we've seen that the American people have been lied to purposely, misled purposely. The system's broke, and RFK is a part of the solution. MAHA movement is the solution. We need a federal health care system that actually serves the American people, we the people. And RFK is putting people in place that are part of we the people. And so it's all about transparency. If you give people the truth, American citizens can make the right choices. That's why we're the best, safest country in the world. We're the greatest country in the world because of the freedom we have. But when you have medical tyranny, literally using medicine as the vehicle to take away people's constitutional rights, where they can't go to church and worship, where you have to stay 6 feet apart. You can't cooperate with the biblical principles of where 2 or more gather in Jesus' name. He's there in our midst. Where you have strip clubs and bars being deemed by the federal healthcare system as essential businesses, and the bars and strip clubs are left open, but churches are fined if they gather. When you have patients not being told informed consent, the risk and the benefit of a product that made $36 billion. Pfizer made $36 billion in 2022 alone when the shot came out. Moderna made $18.1 billion in 2022 alone, 1 year, when the shot came out. Moderna, Bill Gates said on national TV, this was the best investment I ever made, with a big grin. Yet we're still listening to that clown when he's telling us what we should do with our health care. When he's saying that with AI, we're going to replace most doctors and most teachers with AI in 10 years. Why are we even listening to him? Who's even giving him a microphone? I'm just saying, we have already seen the biggest experiment in the history of humanity on humans, the biggest human experiment, and it was a failed experiment. We found out it was a bad idea. We don't need any more of this. What do you think, Mike?
I think that, we have to embrace the public. I think that if you peel back every layer of the onion as fast as they could, I think as humanity would cry. As you've been around an onion before, you know what the tears does to you. I think that, when RFK says to President Trump and everybody else and the Congress members that were sitting around him, September, we'll know what's causing autism in this country. We'll be able to give you a definitive answer. They already know. They know what it is. We know that we shouldn't be injecting heavy metals into our young children. We know for a fact that there's a very less than a one in a billion chance of an infant receiving hepatitis B in a delivery room, something that you can only contract from having sex or sharing a needle, and yet they're recommending. And I think that as a country, the more and more that we start to do things like this podcast, Dr. Bartlett, and the more and more that we start to get, bunesticideworks.com out there, and people start understanding that there are so many things in Mother Nature that we can do to heal our body if we just listen to some biblical principles. God used to always say, well, God didn't say it, but in the Bible, there was so many people that said to pray and fast, right? I've seen miracles if people are willing to listen to it. My medical director of my facility, Dr. Josh Hellman, board certified Harvard physician, emergency room doctor. And, he spent 3 years advising the people in True North out in California, where they're just doing medically assisted water fasting. And to see the amount and read the testimonies, and people are like, oh, fasting's bad. But then I go and read all of the results of the web pages of people saying my mold disease, my Lyme disease, my chronic issue, it went away. It went away when my body started to reset and I stopped feeding myself poison. And is that the answer for everything? No. But if we start taking a little bit of knowledge from all of these doctors who truly do care and are saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to put people above profits. I think that's when we're going to start to see the healthcare system start to change for the better. And again, everybody, RFK cannot make America healthy again. It starts with mom and dad making your home healthy again, watching what you eat, watching what you drink, and who you trust.
Yes. And, going back to the beginning of the show, showing how we had a president that was basically senile, unfortunately. It's pretty clear to the whole world that Joe Biden didn't have just a cognitive decline. There was some severe problems going on there. Yet you have President Trump, who's in excellent health, who scores perfectly as far as his cognitive abilities and neurologic function, and has abstained from alcohol and tobacco his whole life. The top killers in the United States are heart attack, stroke, cancer, and another one that isn't talked about very much is medical errors. And President Trump passed with flying colors. He's going above and beyond as far as standard healthcare based on the history and physical that he had and the labs and the radiologic exams. He then goes the extra mile and has the colonoscopy, which shows he doesn't have colon cancer. He's just going to go with the routine follow-up in 3 years. We have a guy who's fully functional in the White House right now. And that's kind of refreshing for me to know that we have someone who's not just ordinary. He's a brilliant man, and he's not hindered physically, mentally, even emotionally, because they checked exams for that we have for depression, anxiety. The guy is fully intact, and we should celebrate that because we haven't had that for 4 years.
And it's incredible because you realize that where we're at now in this country, and I think the more and more that people stop watching the news media and the outlets that are owned by a select few, that's why they're so scared of people like Joe Rogan and myself for doing these podcasts and putting them out there, because they'll take a little clip of something. And, like I saw this weekend, Donald Trump had attended the UFC, right? How many times have you ever seen Sleepy Joe attend events that are vibrant and full of action and full of life, right? And you've got Trump, who's still out there golfing. He's out there playing in his 70s, and he's enjoying life to the fullest. But there was one clip where he went up and he shook the hand of Robert F. Kennedy, and then he got distracted. Joe Rogan had called him over, so he went right past Miss Kennedy, and people are like, "Oh, the CNN's running this clip like he snubs the Health and Human Services wife," and it's like 30 seconds later he went back over there and is holding her hand and having a conversation, grabbing her shoulder, and it's just this misinformation of let's just continue. Like, you could have the price of gas go to 95 cents and eggs could be $1 a dozen, and then they would go in and be like, Now people are driving more than ever, and Donald Trump has contributed to the pollution of air, and people's cholesterol is going through the roof because he made eggs too affordable. They will find a way, no matter what, to completely hate on an American president. And you know what? You won't find me 4 years ago. I wasn't bashing. I was sitting there praying and working for Joe, praying that Joe would lead us in the right direction. And that's what true patriotism in America is about. It's about praying for the sitting president and not continually pointing out people's flaws, but working together and hoping for something better.
Mike, one thing that's in the news right now is the tariffs. And I want to say nobody has really realized the tariffs are going to force the production of medicines and basic medical products back to the United States. This is an issue of national security. If we had a spat with China or India, any kind of economic war, anything that interfered with the basic medicines for blood pressure, for diabetes, there are things that people need to take for chronic conditions that they didn't want, that they didn't sign up for, but they will die if they don't get those products. And right now we're at great peril when 80 to 90% of our medicines come from China and India. And we need to have the domestic production of generic, safe, proven medicines in the United States. So we have no supply chain interruptions. We actually have had situations where, because of hurricanes, we don't have basic IV fluids, which are needed to save lives in the emergency room, the operating room. There have been shortages of basic medical supplies that are needed for anybody that gets in a car wreck, anybody that's having a heart attack. And we need to have domestic production of generic, safe medicines that have a long-term safety record. And I say that out loud. Long-term safety records are important. We didn't have that with the COVID shots. We don't have that with a lot of new things that are being pushed on commercials on mainstream media. We need to go with the tried and true safe products. And if you don't have long-term safety data, you end up with problems, even if it gets FDA approved, like thalidomide, like Vioxx, like Bextra. And those are disasters. People can look up thalidomide, Bextra, Vioxx, and they'll see that we do, in fact, need to follow common sense. We need long-term safety data. And we need to protect the domestic production, bring back domestic production of essential life-saving and life-sustaining medicines for those that need them. And right now we're in grave danger. And so I see that the tariffs are going to solve one of our biggest problems as far as a national security threat. And that is we need to be able to take care of our people when they get sick and injured. And that's going to require a safe, secure supply line of basic medical supplies. I'm in the emergency room. And so when people come here, they're expecting that they're going to get what they need. We need to make sure that that is secured. And the tariffs by President Trump are actually going to force the domestic production of many things that are going to be for the good of the people.
I'm gonna roll this quick video, and you as a doctor understanding, that if you had one of your patients come in and you didn't think that he was fit to operate a school bus, let alone drive the entire country, before we and thank you so much for your time. I'm so glad that there's not a medical emergency right now that needs your attention. I'm gonna have my producer roll this clip of Biden, and you give me your opinion on what you think about Biden saying this.
Are you open to taking another physical or test before the election? Governor Whitmer of Michigan, for instance, said it wouldn't hurt to take a test.
Well, look, two things. One, I've taken 3 significant and intense neurological exams by a neurologist. In each case, as recently as February. And they say I'm in good shape, okay? Although I do have a little problem with my left foot because it's not as sensitive because I broke my foot and didn't wear the boot. But I'm good. I'm tested every single day about my neurological capacity to do decisions I make every day. You talk to my staff, all of you talk to my staff. Sometimes my staff talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think you have them telling you that all the major ideas we've undertaken haven't been in part initiated by me. I remember when the staff and I said, I'm going to go to South Korea. We're going to get the chip. What are you doing? I'm going to get Japan and Korea back together again after essentially having hostilities toward one another since the end of World War II. I'm going to move and see that we can expand it. The only thing age does is help you with it, creates a little bit of wisdom if you pay attention. And so the point I'm making is, I think it's important that if the neurologist tells me he thinks I need another exam, and by the way, I've laid every bit of the record out, hadn't a thing. You ought to ask Trump for his, okay? I laid it all out. And every single day I'm surrounded by good docs. If they think there's a problem, I promise you, or even if they don't think it's a problem, they think I should have a neurological exam again, I'll do it. But no one's suggesting that to me now.
Did he know what he was saying there?
Speechless. I'm speechless. That was amazing. Nobody gets neurologic exams every day unless they have a neurologic problem, by the way. He said he was having exams every day. But we don't need to know all those exams. We saw with our own eyes what's going on. And having been the medical director of a nursing home that had a Alzheimer's wing, I'm just saying that video was of a man who's not neurologically intact or competent. He was rambling. He was bouncing from thought to thought. It was incoherent. And now we're finding out after the fact about an auto pen that was signing things that supposedly he was signing. It looks like we were on autopilot, and we had a incapacitated pilot for the United States at least for the last several years, maybe for the whole time. Nobody ever told us until President Trump came back in office just how bad things were. But now we have a medically, mentally, legally competent, physically fit President of the United States again. And wow, we were really on a banana peel to have who knows who was making the decisions, because it certainly wasn't Joe Biden based on what I just saw in that clip.
No, 100%, 100%. And, one of the things, Dr. Bartlett, that really teed me off was I went to an anti-Alzheimer summit, and I was watching a bunch of doctors that had come together, and they were talking about ways to prevent Alzheimer's, ways to reverse Alzheimer's, and different types of foods. And it was so good to see doctors talking about things that you can do to support your body. Right. And we're not going to get into all of the things that they were saying you can do. But one of the things that I saw in that presentation, I took a picture of it, and I had to go look it up to see if it was still there. As of 2025, Medicare Guidelines Section 2251.3 says a treatment plan that seeks to prevent disease, promote health, prolong and enhance the quality of life, or a therapy that is performed to maintain or prevent deterioration of a chronic condition is deemed not medically necessary, according to the Medicare guidelines. And I think that's something that RFK, should be working to reverse. We have to figure out how, places like Akita, Japan, are having their women live 10 years longer than the women here in the United States. And again, I hope that you agree with me. President Trump should be focusing more on the supply chain of manufacturing good, safe pharmaceuticals than worried about putting iPhone chips and manufacturing phone devices that are possibly leading to disease themselves. If you look at the EMF and the radiations and all the women that are now, coming out and having tumors, and you see all the girls at the beach that are walking around and they're carrying their phone pressed up right against here, I want to see, like you said, a safer. Correct? Like, isn't that more important to make sure that our medicine isn't coming from overseas and that we're doing efficacy manufacturing and testing here? Isn't that more important than producing a chip for a phone?
Yes, and so some of the things that are happening that President Trump is doing, he may not even realize the health repercussions, but they're helping with making America healthy again. One is securing the border. You know, every year there's measles cases and other infectious diseases that come from other countries on 2 feet to the United States. And so tuberculosis has increased in the United States over the last 4 years. Tuberculosis is a respiratory disease like measles, like COVID, and tuberculosis is disproportionately increased in the immigrant population, the illegal immigrant population, according to all the official numbers. And so where does it come from? Where does tuberculosis come from? Where does measles come from? The CDC documented every measles outbreak in the United States and traced it back to other countries. There are countries that have endemic levels of measles, leprosy, tuberculosis, polio. When we have problems in the United States, they don't come out of thin air. Infectious diseases don't manifest out of thin air. They actually come from other countries to the United States because we have systems in place for safe food, safe water, and for a long time, we had secure borders. But all of those things are at risk now, and RFK is working on safe food, safe water again. And what Trump is doing with securing the border is also closing a door on a national security threat. Because if we have an outbreak of any of the infectious diseases that comes from another country, or even a bioweapon created in a lab that walks across our border into the United States, we're in great peril. The whole nation is. And so securing the border is a medical necessity. It is about making America healthy again. And I don't think President Trump's well aware of that, that's a big deal. And the second thing is the tariffs forcing the production of IV fluids, safe, inexpensive, readily available, effective medicines with long-term safety data need to be made in the United States. If someone has pneumonia, they need antibiotics made in the United States. We do not. I'm old enough to have seen over and over again recalls of children's toys made in China because it had lead in it, because it had heavy metals, because it was a known risk to health. And yet we're letting them make our medications now and importing it to the United States. Tell me how that makes sense, Mike.
It doesn't make any sense at all, which is why I'm so glad that we got to do a deep dive with you. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come on and talk to us about making America healthy again. You were very, very adamant about this budesonide and it actually working and it being very cost effective. I know that there is not a lot of long-term studies on some of these alternative repurposed drugs that are out there, but because I do have you, I'm going to have Drake roll a quick clip, and then I just want to get your opinion on it and figure out what we can do as Americans to be more transparent. And obviously, still, this is not medical advice, but there are things that God has put on this earth for us humans to be able to use. And I think this video that I'm about to show you scares Big Pharma more than anything. Roll that clip.
Must be the
Drake.
truth.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a good story.
Okay.
I have 3 friends. All 3 of them had stage 4 cancer. All 3 of them don't have cancer right now at all. And they had some serious stuff going on.
And what did they take?
Jesus. They took some, what you've heard they've taken.
Ivermectin.
Fenbendazole.
Fenbendazole, yeah.
That's
yeah, I'm hearing that a lot.
They drank hydrochloride something or other.
There's studies on that now where people have proven that
people
they've
are drinking methylene blue and stuff like that.
Yeah, methylene blue, which was a fabric dye.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a textile dye. And now they find out it has profound effects on your mitochondria.
Yep.
Yeah.
This stuff works, man.
There's a lot of stuff that does work, which is very strange because, again, it's profit. When you hear about things that are demonized and that turn out to be effective, you always wonder, well, what is going on here? How is our medical institutions, how have they failed us so that things that do cure you are not promoted because they're not profitable. That they can't control it. They don't have a patent on it, whether it's vitamin D, K2, and magnesium.
Yep.
Thank you, Drake. So, that clip right there, and again, I know that ivermectin's not the answer for everything. I know for a fact it's not, but there's so many videos going around now of, people saying, oh, this isn't safe, this isn't safe. I saw a guy who had stage 4 lung cancer that had spread through his body, and they told him to call hospice and go home. And he started taking fenbendazole, CBD, and some type of mushroom, and the guy went back in to go get a PET scan a year later, and there's absolutely zero cancer in his body. Now, was it Jesus? Was it his faith? We don't know these things. But what I will tell you, Dr. Bartlett, is I spent an hour before I had you come on the show today, and I was trying to find the clip of Jim Humble, who was using MMS, which is chlorine dioxide, and he was treating kids in I think it was Nigeria, and it was for malaria. And they were doing all of this testing, and they were doing it with blood work. Within 24 hours, they were seeing the malaria disappear. And when the big executives, and please don't sue me, Red Cross, if I get the story wrong, okay, but from what I had remembered watching in the video is executives that were higher up, the kind of guys that fly in with a helicopter, when they came down and were like, these 170 children that you cured, this didn't happen. And they're like, what do you mean it didn't happen? We're here and these kids are better. They go, no, we're working on a huge vaccine right now that we're going to roll out all over Africa. And if this solution's being used, they may not allow the grants to go through. And it's kind of like what you said with the budesonide. If it's working, they tried so hard to suppress it so they could move forward with a more profitable agenda. What was it you said? $36 billion Pfizer made in 2022 alone?
That's right. And so it comes down to follow the money. When Joe Rogan was talking with Mel Gibson, but I have respect for both of them because they both have at times leaked the truth at their own peril. And when they say, how can this happen? The answer is follow the money. That seems to be the answer almost every time. And so inexpensive, readily available, safe solutions to a worldwide pandemic like budesonide. Ivermectin is now over the counter in Arkansas because of Governor Huckabee Sanders signing into law. It's over the counter. Hello, for humans. That's for humans, not for horses in Arkansas. I'm just saying that there has been tremendous censorship, disinformation, and misinformation by the federal health. When Anthony Fauci needs a presidential pardon preemptively for the things that he has said and done over the last 4 years about COVID, there's a problem. The system is broke. And so why are these things being suppressed and censored? We already know they are. We know that the FDA knew that red dye number 3 caused cancer 20 years ago, yet they didn't force it out of our foods. And so RFK is the catalyst that is causing America to move in the right direction as far as health. Taking out the known carcinogens, opening up the door for some generic, inexpensive, readily available products that can help. We have the measles outbreak that's being suppressed in Texas, actually where I am, and RFK calls out the fact that that budesonide is helping the measles patients recover. And boy, you should see the operatives that call themselves doctors or news anchor people on the mainstream media yelling that like their hair's on fire, that that RFK is going to break the system. The system's already broke. They're just profiting from the current system, and they don't want it to disappear. But a new thing is happening right now, and that's called Make America Healthy Again, and you're going to see known risks to the American people removed. It's not going to be an option to poison American citizens in their food supply without telling them. They're going to get the information, and the American people make the right choices by and far when they're given the right information. Parents make the right choices but you're going to have the truth come out. And Make America Healthy Again is about transparency. Number 1, 2, and 3.
100% it is. Well, that's about all we have for today, and we want to thank you so much. We do have some cutting news coming in that there's over 150 protesters outside of the building in Sarasota where Anthony Fauci is speaking at right now, led by the Christian conservative patriot Jimmy Levy. He's there as well. Seems like he was met by a band of people in protest. I don't think you get hundreds and hundreds of people to show up if you're doing things right, if they're showing up to protest you. Well, thank you so much for being one of the best parts of the Maha with Mike show, which is our guest. We look forward to having you back on, and I hope that you have a fantastic day at the hospital, and hopefully you don't have to do anything crazy, but if you do, I pray for your hands and your eyes, and thank you so much for being on the show, Dr. Bartlett.
Thank you, Mike. I'm worried that the price of eggs might go up when they start throwing those at Fauci.
Yeah, absolutely. That and some avocados and tomatoes. So go stock up on tomatoes and eggs, guys, because they might be all sold out in Sarasota. Thank you so much, and God bless everybody. We look forward to seeing you in 2 days on the next episode of Maha with Mike.